Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Wildlife for Lunch. This is Eleanor Dean with the Texas Wildlife Association, and today's topic is plant identification for the outdoorsman. Our expert today is Ricky Linex. He is a wildlife biologist for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Today's program is made possible through funding provided by the San Antonio Livestock Exposition, Inc., and it's hosted by the Texas Wildlife Association and the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Now, as I mentioned before, we will go over any questions at the end of the program, so please make sure you are posting any questions in the chat box to all participants. There are no CEU credits offered today, so you won't have to worry about filling out any CEU credit information at the end of the program. But a post-webinar survey should pop up in your browser, so if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback after the program, that would be much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to queue up Ricky's program here and pass the ball over to you. So, all right, here we go.
All right, thank you, Eleanor. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here with you and go through this. We're going to wait a few minutes before we go full screen in case some others join and they can see the chat window over there. Why are we here is, maybe a question you might want to ask. You can fill in the blank with any of those names down at the bottom. I'm a cattle rancher. Why do I need to know how to identify the plants on my property? They're just plants. But if you're going to lease as a rancher a 1,000-acre piece of property and the plant is by 3 ons, that property may not be worth as much to you as if that property was dominated by tall grasses, big blue stem, Indian grass, and others. So it matters a lot what the plants are, not just the color and not just view of the property, but what the individual plants are. Quail hunters, deer hunters, landscapers, native plant people, we all need to know these plants, and that's sometimes people struggle with learning plants. We need to be able to identify them to go to where we can see what the value is of those food plants, what the value is as cover, and how do we manage those plants. And Dale Rollins, you probably heard before, has got a good quote. You need to know your plants and know how to manipulate those plants. And we're going to hope to learn some today. And this is not going to all be text, I can assure you, but I wanted to get a couple of these statements out of the way. A lot of times open up a plant ID book and it can be very intimidating. A lot of big words that you're not familiar with, but you can learn traits, plant characteristics that will help narrow down that search and cull out a lot of the other plants that are not, they don't fit those traits that you've got in your hand of a plant that matches up to some traits, and we'll show you those in a little bit. Now, there's no excuse, actually, for not being able to identify plants. With all the resources we have today, plant books, not just plant books in the United States, plant books for Texas, plant books for regions of Texas, the Panhandle plant books, the Central Texas plant books, the Trans-Pecos plant books. We've got a lot better than what those old botanists back in the day had. This is the Ferdinand Lindheimer is known as the father of Texas botany. He collected from 1836 to 18. And let's just go to full screen now, and maybe this will show up a little better. He had in part of his collections that he did, he was not the earliest botanist to come to Texas, but he was the most prolific. Collected a tremendous number of plants, discovered a lot of new varieties in the Edwards Plateau, south central Texas area, and even had several plants named after him, such as this Texas yellow star. button to advance. There we go. Interesting about Lindheimer, in 1842, a letter to Ferdinand Romer, and said he was glad to get this book on the lower left, Manual of Botany. Prior to this book, he only had 3 other plant books, and you can see examples of those. They're not very technical, very detailed. The one in the middle, Flora Dresden, was written in German back in 1821. This particular copy, I found this on the internet, and I scrolled down. A family, their Solanum. You look down near the bottom of that page, that paragraph 572, Solanum nigrum. That's a nightshade that was named back then, and look at the information. Just one paragraph is all the descriptive information he had to identify a plant. We got it so much better than he did then. But that same plant, Solanum nigrum, is still, that name is still being used. A lot of plant names change over time. Seems like every new generation of this, there's a lot of plants that change. They're trying to get them into better families that fit, take them out of a category that they don't really fit in and put them in something better. But that one has changed stayed the same for about 200 years. Some additional early collectors in Texas. Dr. Edwin James was probably the that came to Texas in 1820, and he collected going across the Panhandle as part of a military expedition. Landier collected from 1828 to 1834. He was really more interested in the Indians than he was as a botanist, and that's the way Dr. James, he was trained as a physician, but explorers would carry people like a physician, and that physician had duties, multitask. They collected plants back in the East. Thomas Drummond came to Texas for about a year. You see some additional early botanists, and you start recognizing the last people. And they came on into the 40s. Mary Sophie Young was one of the early female botanists, I believe the second female botanist that's known in Texas. She was one of the first botanists to go to work for the University of Texas, and she collected plants in the Texas Panhandle and the Trans-Pecos back in 1900. She had a little donkey, not a mule, like you may be out collecting plants in a mule, but yours has 4 wheels and a steering wheel. So see how much better we have it than the early botanists. And Julien Rivershon, one of the later botanists to arrive in Texas, came from France, arrived in Dallas in 1856. He was a dairyman, but he already had collected plants in France. Picked it back up in 1876 until his death in 1905. And I kind of highlight him because he collected plants in North Texas, where a lot of these other people collected in South or Far West or the Edwards Plateau, and he became the botanist of North Texas. And about 3 years ago, based on a newsletter that Burr Williams, Sibley Nature Center at Midland put out, I got an idea for a newsletter. His was on the Permian Basin. I thought, well, we need to do one for this region of Texas. And so we started a little newsletter through the NRCS, and we named it Rivershon Naturalist in his honor. And you can Google Rivershon Naturalist, or you can look at that box in the red square full address. But you can Google Rivershon Naturalist, and it'll pop up this box. You can read our past issues. We're always looking for good articles, photos. For Randall Henry, there's his address, and we'll sure take a look at them. Now, across Texas, there's people learning about plants from the Panhandle, from the Trans-Pecos to the piney woods of East Texas, across the plains, the high plains of Texas, all the way to the prairies and plains of South Texas. And don't forget, we've got a lot of young people that need to learn these plants. Youth education continues on plants, and it needs to. 12 to 13, 14 years, riparian management has become a bigger player. And we need to learn not just the plants on the uplands, but you need to learn the plants that grow down near and in the water. So you got a challenge ahead of you to learn more plants. And just like if you're at a field day or at this webinar, you can click in that chat box. You can ask a question. Don't be afraid to ask. This vegetational region or vegetational area map is a good resource that you can go back to. The book in the lower left list of the vascular plants, that's about a 20-year-old publication now. Eventually it'll come out online. But if you're in the rolling plains and you're trying to figure out a plant that you got, and you think you get a name, and you look in this checklist and it says that plant grows on coastal mounds in the Gulf prairies and marsh, and that's the only place it grows, and that it is a quick way to kind of verify you're on the right track with plant ID. It's kind of a shortcut. Now, from the Manual of Vascular Plants of Texas, listed there at the bottom, there's about 5,400 plant taxa in Texas. And a taxa is just a unit of classification. It's just this Manual of Vascular Plants source, a very technical book, 1,800 pages, no pictures, no drawings, but it is probably the Bible for Texas plants and woodies. We have some good books. Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas is just as detailed, but only covers, you know, a part of Texas. This Manual of Vascular Plants of Texas. You may be feeling a little overwhelmed with all of these plants, but you don't have to be. There's 520 species of grasses in Texas. A little over 10% of our total plants are grasses. If you were to learn 10% just of the grasses, 52 species, you would probably know more than 95% of the people in your county. There's just not a lot of plant knowledge out there. We've got some good botanists in our state, good botanists that help us with plants, but out in the countries, it's not as hard as you might think. And one thing that separates you and from the true experts, and I don't consider myself an expert, but I'm a student of plants, is those experts can identify a lot more plants, but they also know how to follow a botanical key and identify the ones they don't know, and you'll learn that today. As we go back and learn about our plant naming, Carl Linnaeus developed what he called the binomial nomenclature that has a first name and a last name, a genus and a species name for all the organisms. He did this for animals, for plants. There, Nacella leucocraca, how it's listed since about 2000. But if you're older than 45 or so, you probably learned it as Stipa leucocraca. So it has one scientific name, but as you notice in the next line, there are several common names: wintergrass, speargrass, Texas needlegrass. And this will be the one and only time you'll hear me call it Texas tussock grass, because I don't believe we're in Russia, we're in Texas. But if you look at the spelling of Texas needlegrass, no between needle and grass, when we go to the plants database, you'll see that that space is going to give us some frustration. Here's another grass, our state grass of Texas, Cytosgrama. The species name in Latin gives you names described. So curti means to shorten or curtail. Pendula means a hanging or pendulous growth. So short and pendulous describes the seeds of that plant. And Latin is used for describing the scientific name. Tradition, it's the national language of science. It's considered a dead language in that there's people using this language, so there's not any new words or slang words being added. It's kind of held back there, and that makes it handy for being able to use as a precise naming of plants. It also has what's described as a meaning the words are very concise with few other meanings, so it's very distinct and easy to figure out what it's trying to say. Some of the earlier words were also listed in Greek, but Latin is the predominant naming of these words. You'll also see some, like in that the bottom of that first paragraph, Bouteloua, Curtimbula, That is a variety, and that is a plant of Cytostroma, but it is evolution and reproduction. It's developed a little different trait, and that trait will reproduce from seeds. It's a true variety. So it has the initials variety right there. And then down at the bottom, the white cloud flowering dogwood, that is a cultivar. That is a plant that's been selectively bred toward larger flowers or better tasting fruit or something. And those are called cultivars. You go to this USDA plants database, and you can Google plants database and find it, or you can type in that HTTP address there. We're only going to concern ourselves with the family, genus, species, and we can move around in those. We can identify all these plants. So here's the home page of the plants database. This is something you need to bookmark and get familiar with. You can do a search for plants, and right where that yellow arrow is, I've typed in the Texas wintergrass name, and we're going to hit go, and this is what will pop up in plants profile. The scientific name we entered, you see the common name Texas wintergrass. It has the symbol name, we'll get into that, NALE3. Perennial, tells what family it's in. On the right-hand side, there's a fact sheet that you can read about it. Some of the plants have planting guides that you can click on. If we look down at the bottom of that page, images. So there's one image of the plant right there visible, and as we scroll down, you see two additional, one photo, one line drawing of the seeds of Texas winter. That you see the synonyms, and this is very important because if you had typed in the old name, Stipa, it would still bring you to this page as the current name and the synonym of a previous name of Stipa right there. So it updates. Even if you're using the old names, it will update and bring you to the correct page. The distribution. Texas wintergrass appears in about 5 states in southern United States. If you click on Texas, this box will pop up with green shading for the counties where Texas wintergrass is known to be. If you click on the state again, it puts the counties behind it. Now, Texas wintergrass is very common across Texas. It shows up in nearly all counties. The reason that all counties are not highlighted green is that the plants database goes off of documented occurrences of the plant. So they get information, herbariums at the different universities in Texas and other states, and they will say how many collections of Texas, or they'll just say, we need to send us everything you've got on your plants. And let's say that the University of Texas herbariums a note that we have 330 collections of Texas wintergrass from 30 counties in Texas. And here are the county names. So then they list those counties. That's why not all of the counties are highlighted. It's just that somewhere selected a plant in Floyd County or Mills County into the plants database and update that list. That's possible. So here's where I changed the, where it's written on the left there is Texas needlegrass. I changed the search from scientific name to common name and hit go. And notice that space between needle and grass, no data found. It's very specific, that word correctly, both scientific names and common name. Frustrating. The best way to go about searching this is actually the scientific name. I label that a sure bet because there's only one scientific name for that plant. The common name choice and also the symbol choice drop-down box, the common name I label the gambler method because it may or may not show what you're listing. You see in the photo there, Texas wintergrass is the common name, and down there below it, other common names, Texas needlegrass, but it doesn't show speargrass, doesn't show wintergrass. So this kind of a hit or miss with a yes or with a common name. And then the symbol, abbreviation that's used in academic research. Universities, federal governments may use this. When you're out there doing instead of saying Botaloa curtimbudula, they'll just say Boku when you list that plant at that mark on the transect. And that comes from the first two letters of the genus and species name. And if you've got duplicates, more than one who, another letter, the variety Cespidosa, they'll add the C onto it. Or if there is another plant like the BOCU2 down at the bottom, it has the same first and last two letters, but it's a different plant, so they give it a letter 2 to show it's different than the original Botaloa curtimbudula. All right, there's 3 methods I'm going to discuss
Hey,
with
Ricky,
you.
can I just
Yes.
pop in for a second? Hi. Your microphone's cutting out quite a bit. So I just wanted to, it may be something that we can't fix, but if you could just check your connection, make sure it's plugged in all the way. Yeah, because it's cutting out a little bit on some of the things you're saying.
Is it loud enough?
I can hear you okay. Yeah, it's just every once in a while, one of the words you say will cut out. So I just wanted to hop in and make sure it's plugged in all the way.
Well,
it may not be something we can fix.
It is in the socket, so.
All right, then we'll
okay.
Continue along. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, the first method we're going to talk about, since you just learned that symbol terminology, I'm going to test you with the symbols of the 2 words that I'm thinking about. Their first 2 letters, FL, the first 2 letters of the second word are PA. Flip. Many of you have used the flip-a method. I have, certainly have. That's flipping pages. You got a color-coded book, something like that. It's easy, it's quick, doesn't take much experience. But the con may be that that particular plant you're looking at is just not in that a method's going to arrive at the correct ID. Family association, where we're using similar plant characteristics among different plants to narrow down the search. The con of that is there's some plants families that have similar traits, such as the verbena and the mint families. And with that, it can lead to some frustration when you're trying to narrow down those 2 families. The hardest to use, but the most accurate keys, either a dichotomous key, online keys on the internet. But this will give you the correct answer every time. Now the drawback, you got to learn some plant terms. All the plant books will have a gloss back. Go back and look at what those hard words are. The key will require that you have a flower or flower and fruit, and if you don't have to finish the identification. And you may need a metric ruler to be able to follow the sizes that they're listing in the key. Now here is a plant family characteristic page. I Googled plant family characteristics. The nation down at the lower 6 item on that internet search, you can go and get this publication, Field Identification of the 50 Most Common Plant Families, and it lists the cotton family, or also known as the mallow family, Mallovaceae. It's some characteristics that are similar among all those plants down at the very bottom. Cotton, hibiscus, mallow, sida, okra, similar characteristics because these plants are all in that same family. Now that one you can go and get on your own. Eleanor is going to email you an old publication I found, just 4 pages, that has 17 families listed in form like this, just a written text. But it can also be used to identify the plants, at least narrow down your search. So let's go and do a search. We've got this plant that we found on a creek up in Roberts County in the Panhandle of Texas. Miami is the county seat, north of Pampa. Plant's about 4 to 5 feet tall. Seems to be erect growth, although it's leaning out over that creek. It has flowers that come out of the leaf axils, as well as flowers in the terminal end of the plant. and it's got big showy flowers. So let's see if we can start figuring out what it is. We look at it up close. It's got 4 petals. It has sepals. It has flowers that begin to fade red as they mature, and it also has a stigma with a 4-way cross right there that you can see. So that gives us some pretty definite clues. As we look at the stem, you see the seed production right there. That's the ovary attached to the stem, and there's a floral tube going down to the flowers on the right-hand side. So we're going to take this information, and I've pulled 3 different families out of this handout that Eleanor will email to you, and we're going to see if we can match up. So this one says for the nightshade family, flowers for Maris. And Maris is just it means parts. It's just a Greek suffix that's the number of parts. You can say 5 petals, just as easy as saying 5 Maris. But flower had 4, and this one has 5. So that's not leading us down the right path. So let's click another family, the mallow family. This one has 5 sepals, 5 petals. Well, again, that's not correct. Let's pick another one, evening primrose family. It's sepals 4, generally reflexed when the flower opens. We noticed that in that flower that those sepals were pointed back. They may adhere to each other. Petals 4, stamens 4 or 8, stigma usually 4-lobed. And examples would be Gara and evening primroses. So that one has got promise. That's the one we're going to chase. So I brought that photo back up, and now you can see there's sepals. They're 4. They're reflex, but they're not divided. So there's only 2 sepals appearing there, but those sepals would split and make 4. There's 4 petals, yellow, fading reddish. There's 8 stamens, and the crossed. So that matches our flower. Here is the hypanthium, this floral tube, this long tube that goes from the ovary to the flower is very noticeable, not very. And as we go into this, you see now we're in the evening primrose family. Halfway down that page, family recognition in the field. So this is those traits again, herbs based with parts usually in 4s, and a conspicuously inferior ovary. Well, what the heck is that? An inferior ovary is an ovary that's located below the rest of the flower parts. So this matches ours. Our ovary is attached to the stem, connected by a long floral tube to the flowers. And a tube-shaped hypanthium, often present. That matches. Stamens typically 8. So that's good. So now we're into the dichotomous key. You notice there's a 1 right here and a 1 over in the page. Let's see if they're going to, there we go. That's the first number 1, and that's the second one. One of those will be a yes answer for the plant we're looking at. One will be a no answer. So let's read the first one. Petals equal, not clawed. Well, what is a clawed petal? If we look at this drawing, you see a flower with 3 petals in the upper left there, and what appears to be 4 smaller petals hanging down. So our flower does not have claws. So that when it says not clawed, that would be correct. Yellow to white or pink in color, that's correct. Flowers, that's correct. Basal, axillary, or internal inflorescence. Well, we had axillary, and so that sounds right. Let's go down. Petals are slightly unequal, and that's not correct because ours were equal. It says the petals are clawed. That's incorrect. And we have white to pink or reddish flowers. And so the first number answer. Then we go to the number 2, and there's 2 choices there. The first one, the hypanthium, again, that is the tube. And you can see that hypanthium below the flower, below the sepals, all the way down to the stem. In the first number 2, it's is not prolonged beyond the ovary. The flower parts, the petals, stamens, at the summit of the ovary. So that means it's a very short floral tube. And then the sepals persistent in fruit. Well, what does that mean? Well, I've got another photo, if you can look at, right here. On the right-hand side, you see a plant that has 5 petals, and when those petals fall away, the sepals remain on top of that short floral tube. Now, that plant is the one that if we read across all the way to the right, Ludwigia, or water primrose, but that's not the flower that we're looking for. So the first number 2 is not correct. We want to go down to the second number 2. Hypanthium, much prolonged beyond the ovary, pedestal-like, the flower parts well separated from the ovary, and the sepals deciduous in fruit. So again, the sepals are up there right below the petals, and when we take away the sepals, there's not going to be any sepals attached to that ovary. As you can see there on the left, the sepals are gone. So that's second number 2 is correct. So now we've got a choice among those 2 number 3s right there. That's going to be our plant, one or the other. All right, our first choice there, sticks deeply lobed or branched and not peltate. So there's another one of those words to go to the glossary. I've added a photo up here to show you what peltate is. And peltate is a shield-shaped stigma. Imagine a shield that a Roman soldier would have. So that's not the shape of the stigma on our plant there in the middle. So it's not peltate. The first number 3 is correct because the second one says stigma is entire to only slightly lobed and peltate. And if I enlarge that photo on the right, you can see that that is a large. So the second number 3 is incorrect. The first one is correct, and that is an Outdoorsman. This photo on the upper right shaped eastern primrose in the Callilophus genus. So we're going to go now. We're going to turn a page in the book. And I didn't mention it at first, but down at the bottom of the page, this botanical key comes from the Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas, put out by the Botanical Research Institute in Fort Worth. Austin College has a copy online at that address you see there at the bottom. Page or 2 over to the Oenothera genus. And here we are. Now we're down from 650 plants to 124. We're narrowing down that search. And here's where we've got to start again with the number 1 Hypanthium, 0.2 to 5 centimeters long. That is from 1/8 of an inch to 2 inches. So ours is longer than that, sounds like. And it says ovaries and fruits, neither deeply or winged. Let's go see what the second, and I'm going to show you again. There's the Hypanthium. There's that long tube. That's a lot more than 2 inches. Let's go see what the second number 1 option is. Hypanthium 2 to 12.5 centimeters. Now we're talking in length. That one does match up with our drawing. This is not the same plant there visible, but that is the right length. It says ovaries and fruits deeply, sharply angled and winged, except neither deeply sharp angled nor winged in Oenothera jamesii. So what they are describing are sharp angles and wings left. That red arrow is, and as that plant matures and that ovary grows, the seed production or the seed pod begins to have that winged appearance. But that's not our plant. Ours has the smaller rounded lobes. So going to one here, this is correct. That part where it says except neither sharp angled nor winged is our good. Now we're going to go to question number 10. There's 2 of those. Plants essentially stemless or with erect or trailing stems to a ½ meter or less in length. Well, ours were 4 and 5 feet tall, so that's not correct. Go down to the second. Plants with erect stems, usually 1 to 3 meters tall. That sounds right. Ovaries and sharp angled nor winged. Leads us to our plant, Oenothera jamesii. And if we go a page or two in, up at the top, you can see that this plant was named for that doctor who crossed the Panhandle back in 1820. Common name, trumpet evening primrose. It's a robust biennial, sends up vegetative growth, flowers, makes reproductive growth second year. A pressed pubescent, meaning it has some hairs that lay flat to the stems or possibly leaves. Stems erect to 3 meters tall, and it gives range for north central Coryell, Somerville, Tarrant, Williamson counties. But down to the last sentence there, it says mainly Edwards Plateau west to the Trans-Pecos. And we were in the Panhandle. If you go to the plants database and look up there at the top, there is Roberts County just below a county in green, and you can see that we're close enough that that matches up. That is our plant. So, trumpet evening primrose. Another way you can identify plants, and Lindheimer would have sure loved to have had this method, I'm sure. You can go to the plants database, look there at the bottom, and there is where we're going to talk about the plants identification key. That's what we're going to do. It's an online version. You click on that. It brings this page up. We're going to, where it says click here, the plants interactive ID keys. Click that. You got choices: grasses, legumes, gymnosperms. Had to look that up. Shrub, monocots, ericaceae. And I looked that one up. That's in the blueberry family. I'm not sure why they have it separated. But let's go through the on grasses. And this is available both in online or as a download. And we're going to work online. And if you look, there's you have to choose. So we're going to scroll down, and we're going to click on Texas right there on the online. Click right there. And this is the grass that we're going to identify. It's a perennial grass. You may recognize it right off the bat. It's a perennial, sod-forming grass. It has above-ground runners or stolons. It has separate male and female. Upper left, that tag down the plant, those little tan-colored bumps are the female seeds, the burr. Actually, in my left hand, I've got both male and female plants and held together there. But that's the plant we're going to identify. Page, Grasses of Texas. You click on choices over there on the left. You don't have to click all of them, but click the ones you know. You got the plant in front of you. You say, well, this is a perennial, so we're going to click on perennial there, number 2. You put a check mark. I've checked it. Then you click on matching taxa. And if you notice on the right-hand side where the red arrow is, it moved that character choice over to the right-hand side. It moved the number 2 perennials. Notice it's gone from the left. If you make a mistake and you think that is actually an annual, I need to back up. You can just hit that little R at the tip of that red arrow, and that will move the perennial choice back over to the left, and then you can choose annual. But we're good to go with perennial. We're sticking with that. Right-hand side in that long column, that's all. When we clicked perennials, it culled all the annuals out. You didn't notice any change, but it did. Now let's go down and pick another fact about that plant that we know. All right, we can see it has stolons or runners. So you click that, hit the matching tab, click several of these at one time. But what my fear is if I'm trying to figure something out and I click 5 or 6 of these charts, how do I figure out which one is wrong? As long as I'm clicking them one at a time and I can see I'm making progress over here, at least I think I'm on the right track. So we're going to click matching taxa, and we've got 2 there, and now it's reduced from over 500 grasses down to 69 with just 2 clicks. And if you notice where the red arrow is now, there's a plant with a little different color grass that we're going to eventually wind up with as our choice, our selection. And I want you to see it, and you'll see it stays. It's the one we're looking for, and it's going to hang there with us. So let's go find another choice that we can look at that we recognize over here on the left. The stems are mat or turf forming. It's a carpet forming grass. From 69 to 13 choices. And our color, maroon colored grass, funny. Leaf blades vary millimeters, because if meters, you check number 67 instead of 66, you're going to make a mistake. So we're going to check number 66, hit matching taxa, and with 4 clicks, we've got it down to 5 grasses that lies within. Let's make one more choice here. Plants dioecious. We said they had separate male and female parts. Hit matching taxa. Down with 5 clicks, you've identified that grass, or at least you've got a grass that matches the selections you made. Hopefully they're the right selections based on having that plant in hand. And you might be confused about that name because that looked like buffalo grass, and you may have learned it. The plant has changed that name to Bouteloua. If you've got a plant book that's 20, 30, 40 years old, it will show up as Buccolodactyloides. But that's one way you can use the online versions. And one of the online versions of a plant data is they don't usually have enough plants. I've seen some where they only have 50 woody plants. That's not much use. But this one is huge. This is a huge database, not only for Texas, but all of the other states. So this is worth your while spending a little time to become familiar with. Now we got to get those plants back from being out in the field, back to our home or office, wherever we're going to ID them. This is the old school way of transporting plants, a vasculum. The old botanist would lay damp moss papers or leaves in there to create a little humidity, put their plants in, and as you can see in these photos, they're carrying those around, and that's a way of transporting and keeping the plants as fresh as possible so they don't wilt. We've got some more modern techniques that you might want to use, and here's some tools that you need to be carrying if you're going to be gathering plants. A sharpshooter, that sharp-pointed shovel. We need to dig plants. And why do you think we need to dig plants? Right off the bat, if we can determine by the root if that's an annual or a perennial, that online key, we can cull a lot of plants just by knowing if it's annual or perennial. You can tell that from the root, tell that from old stems that may be still present and the above ground growth. You need some pruners to take woody samples. Better than carry a few Ziploc gallon-sized bags. Put a damp paper towel in each bag. As you gather a Ziploc bag, seal it up, put it in a backpack, carry it back to the truck. That'll keep the plant fresh. Keep it out of the sun as much as possible. Garbage bags, plastic bags work well. The clear ones are better than the black because the black absorbs heat too much. Probably the Cadillac style of gathering these plants up. I think Steve Nelly may be the first to give me this technique. About a 48-quart igloo type ice chest. Put about 5 thrifty nickels in the bottom of it. Convenience store. And then put a bag of ice or the equivalent of a bag of ice on top. Cool the plants down. Then on top of the bag of ice, lay 2 to 3 layers of newspaper or thrifty nickel layers, not just 2 or 3 pages, and that separates the plants from the ice so you don't get leaf burn or flower burn from the ice. We'll also talk about plant presses and then scanners last, but let's go into the plant presses. Photo showing an old botanist staring off into space, wondering his fate in life. But look at the number of plant presses they would have to carry. Back then in a wagon, they would have 20, 30 plant presses, maybe 1,000 sheets of blotter paper to put between the plants to dry those plants out. And then they would have to change those blotter papers and dry those. It was a hard hard life back then. If you want to make your own plant press, you can. You can buy a plant press. This is just a couple of pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, 12 by 18 inches. The straps can be the ropes. But these ratcheting straps are quick to pull the plant press down, and this aids in drying and keeps plants from wrinkling or mildewing as bad. The internal parts of a plant press, the cardboard, and you want a cardboard so that the corrugations run across the short side. Now, I've got an old piece of newspaper there on top. Well, you're using newspaper for blotter paper because newspaper is cheaper than the blotter papers. But this is a 1982 newspaper on top. I went and measured a current newspaper. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram is 11 by 11 inches. This particular newspaper measured 11.5 by 14. So newspapers folded over are not as useful as they used to be because they're smaller. But if you look underneath that newspaper, there's a thrifty nickel. That's still a good size. They measure 11.5 by 17 inches, very close to that 12 by 18 that we're using the plant press. Very clean herbarium sheets if you want to mount your plant on a herbarium sheet. And you can make just a little portable plant press out of a couple of pieces of old paneling or thin plywood held together by a couple of rubber bands instead of straps, using newspaper as blotters and dividers. Don't have to have cardboard. You can put a flower in that or a very small part of a plant. And you can carry that in the glove box or put it in the door you pick up and have something that you can get or back home and look at it later. In the last 10 or 12 years, there's also been this method of using a flatbed scanner, laying a plant on the glass, closing the lid and hit scan, and getting a scan of the plant. This is about earlier. You can, when you scan it, you're going to save it. We save them as JPEG images. Then you can enlarge, you can crop that JPEG, and you see this is the same image where the red arrow is as that original scan on the right. It's just enlarged. It maintains good detail, good definition of the hairs, the parts of the plant. Here, look at the hairs that you can see right there. Excellent color. You can see the stipules, the small leaf-like arrangements at the base of the leaf. Good detail. Almost to the point of you wanting to scratch a printed scan and to see if it's a pressed plant or a real plant. Now, I've tested this theory on 2 people under the age of 32, and neither one of them recognized this term at the top. Is it Memorex? In the 70s through about early 80s, you were Fitzgerald commercials where she could break the glass. They would show another glass breaking and then ask, is it live or is it Memorex? Are these plants, which is which? You know, a scan on the left, just as good as a photo on the right. You can also lay seeds on the photo, took leaves on the left-hand side, turn one up, one down, so you get both sides leaf in the scan. In plants, you don't get plants with, they don't have seeds. You can tell that old rough, coarse root, that's a perennial. There's an old stem growing up through it that also says perennial. And you can take all these scans that you've got, put them on an 8.5 by paper, put a label down there that has all the plant, the name, the class. Is it a grass, forb, or woody? What's the value to a deer or quail or a cow even? Date collected, who collected it. Up in the upper left, you can put your ranch logo or your hunting camp logo or your brand. Put these into a 3-ring binder, and you can build yourself plants of the Buckskin Ranch and have that on your table of your lodge or your house. It's a very intriguing thing. People like to look at this. They want to learn about plants, and you can help them learn. Since that's a JPEG image, you can email that plant to different people and see if they can help you identify it. I got this as a scan in an email. And if you or dove or turkey at their diet, you want to look at seeds, you don't have a macro lens on your camera, you can scan those seeds. Scale or ruler, and this is a paper one, but probably a clear plastic as thin as you can find, like a 1/16 of an inch or less would be better, so that it doesn't hold the scanner lid away from the glass and cause any fuzziness. But you can see with good resolution, maybe at 600 pixels per inch, you can see good detail in those seeds. Now here's some facts about press plants. You have one copy of that plant. They can fade over time. I've got some that are 30 years old that have certainly faded. They're fragile. If you don't mount them, if they're just still in your plant press, they're very fragile. They're tedious to review. You move the dividers, open up the newspaper. It's just hard to do that. But with a scanned plant image or a photograph, you can email that plant to tens or hundreds of people for help in IDing it. The plant fades in a scan. You can adjust for contrast, brightness. If you're using binder page, you can even, as a JPEG, get that little side of the photo, and you can spin that photo or fit better between the plant label and your logo. And you can view these photos anywhere, laptop, smartphones. You can put them as a slideshow. You can put them as one of those picture frames with the slideshow ability. And I'm not much on social media sites, but I understand the process that they have. You can post a photo or a scan, and somebody maybe can help you identify that plant. And don't forget a good digital camera. It's a good tool. Learn how to adjust that camera. Sometimes you need a lot of sharpness. Sometimes you want to blur out the background, and you need a shallow depth of field. So learn how to manipulate that camera. So here's my summary page. Fear not to botanize across the fields and plains of Texas. Dare to climb and see what grows upon the hills and beyond. In each season, waiting to test your ID skills. Take the tools you learned here today and apply them, for now you begin your journey as an amateur botanist. And that's my contact information. Eleanor, I think I'll turn it back over to you. I'm going to see if I can turn this back down to, there we go, back down to the normal size. So, right. Eleanor, are you there?
I am here. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so if anyone does have any questions, please post them in the chat window. Make sure you're sending to all participants so that everyone can see the program. So thank you so much, Ricky, for that. And
you're welcome.
I will go over some of the questions here. We had a question earlier on when you were on slide 67. You were talking about the different items in your chest. And someone asked, can you please repeat the first item in the chest? The voice dropped out. We were talking about the sharpshooter.
Okay, the use of a sharpshooter, which is a sharp shovel with a sharp, narrow blade, you would want to use that to dig a plant rather than just break it off or cut the top. The plant, and then you have the root, and you can look at the root and pretty well tell whether it's an annual or a perennial. So that just gives you a direction to start. We're going to look at perennial plants only since it's a perennial. If you're using that plants database online key, you check perennial, and that's your first choice. So that's why you want to take a sharpshooter and not just show up with a broken off plant and ask someone to identify it, because if it doesn't have the root, it's a lot harder to try to figure that plant out.
Okay. She was also wondering what items need to be put in the ice chest.
Well, we dig, if it's an orb or a grass, you could dig the whole plant, shake the dirt off, put the whole plant in the ice chest. If it's a woody plant, you would want to take a limb that's got enough leaf, maybe fruit or flower, that you could use to identify the plant later. So normally you want to try to get more than one plant in that ice chest. So if it's a shrub, I would say a sample from the size of a softball to as large as That should give you enough leaf and overall shape and be able to identify it. If it's a forb, try to dig the whole plant, even if you have to bend the stem of the plant over to fit in the cooler.
All right. We have another question. How do roots help us differentiate annuals from perennials?
Well, the annual root is usually a smaller, tap-rooted type, little straight, skinny root, whereas I'm talking forbs predominantly. A perennial forb, after the first year, that root is going to get kind of like a bark look to it, a rough root. It won't be a skinny root. It'll be a massive root. And if you want to see how massive some of these roots can be, dig up a bush sunflower. It'll have a root as big as an empty paper towel tube. So that's no doubt that's a perennial when you dig it up.
Okay. Is there a way to quickly know if a plant is common, rare, or in danger of extinction?
Well, there are some lists of threatened and endangered plants on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife web. I think they're also on the Texas Parks and Wildlife website. I'm not sure if they're on an AgriLife Extension website or not. You can go and look for threatened or endangered plants, rare plants. There's even a book, Rare Plants of Texas. The checklist that I mentioned would not have that information. It gives you whether it's an annual, perennial, native or introduced, warm season or cool season, and what region of the state it grows in. So probably the easiest way to find out threatened and endangered would be doing some online searches.
All right, and then somebody asked what was the field ID of 50 plant families, and I believe somebody has posted the link down here.
Okay.
Artemis.Austin.
That's the one that will get you to the Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas, the online book, and it's about 1,700 pages too, but it has excellent line drawings of the plants, which the Manual of the Vascular Plants of Texas does not have any drawings. Plant families, if you just Google plant family characteristics, about the 5th or 6th plant or posting there on the results will show that link, and it'll be titled 50 Common Plants Characteristics of the Temperate Region.
All right then, and it looks like we're wrapping
I see
up.
that link is, Tiana has posted that link for the 50 plant families right there as well.
Yeah, I can see
Tiana's
it. Okay.
Botanical Research Institute of Texas, which published the Illustrated Flora of North Central Texas. They also have an illustrated books. If you have a pair of them, you can also use them for building up your arm muscles because they weigh about 5 pounds each.
All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions for right now, so if you have any other questions, please make sure you're posting them to all participants. Okay, here's another one we have here. Can you start your search with the ecology where you find the plant, that is, the location and the conditions?
I don't know about the plants database. I think you can start with a genus if you know the genus of but I'm not sure they've got them to where you can start with like an ecological, if that's what they're asking. Most of them are going to start with grasses, forbs, woodies. That's your first choice. And then you just got to dive into it, keying it out. There will be more of these online plant keys developed over time. They've only been around maybe 5 to 7 years. And they were very basic, very simple, very just a few plants, but they're getting better.
All right, so looks like we're nearing the end of the question.
Someone's asking about the slides. copy of this?
Yes, those of the presentation. We will be putting the presentation up on our website, this entire presentation up on at www.texas-wildlife.org. You should be able to watch this presentation again, where you should be able to see the slides on there. So yeah, I'm sure they'll have to send you a private email for access to the slides themselves. But
okay,
I'll kind of close out here and just keep an eye out for any extra questions. But thank you so much, Ricky, for coming today and doing this presentation for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I will be putting this up on our website, like I mentioned before, and it will be coming, the handout that Ricky mentioned earlier will be coming from the account. I'm going to write it here in the chat box. It'll be webinars at texas-wildlife.org. So if for some reason you don't get that, you can either email me at that website, at that, email address, or you can email Ricky with his information and he can send you that handout as well. So if you don't get that by the end of the day, then please let me know. And we have another program coming up. We have a quail management program by Dale Rollins next month on March 21st. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that program. And whenever you leave here, a window should pop up with a survey. So we'd really appreciate hearing your thoughts on today's program. Any feedback would be much appreciated. So don't think I'm seeing any more questions. So with that, thank you so much, Ricky, and hopefully we will see all of you guys next month at the next program.
Thank you, Eleanor.